Hey, everybody, welcome into the weekly live stream for the Casey for U.S. Senate campaign. This session is the last of our Money Doesn't Grow on Trees episodes. We've been focusing on the national debt. We've been focusing on the economy. Last week, we had Bill Hawk, an economist out of the University of South Carolina's Darla Moore School, to talk about tariffs. And this week, we're joined by the founder of the South Carolina Emerging Tech Association to talk about a vision for our digital future, including various digital currencies and access thereto. So we're going to get to that here in just a minute. But before that, I want to give you a update on how the campaign is going and what we've been able to do over the last few weeks. So as I mentioned last Wednesday, we had two festivals over the weekend. We had peaches and watermelons, and we did not really consume very many peaches or watermelons, but we did go all the way to Gaffney and got a chance to be in the parade. Thank you so much to the people of Gaffney for welcoming us. We had a great turnout from a volunteer perspective, so we had plenty of people to pass out bubbles and lots of these fans. I think I showed them to you guys last week. They're great, right? It was very hot in Gaffney, so people really wanted these fans. We passed out a lot of those. And then we handed out some postcards as well to let people know about the campaign. And now we're still sort of waiting for those distributed pieces to generate some more website hits and Facebook follows and things like that. So not the immediate response we've gotten off of some of the other parades that we've been to, where the very next day we saw a huge jump in our website traffic. So a little bit wondering what's going on with that, but hopefully we'll end up with some website traffic because of that and pick up some followers and some people who are interested in what we're trying to do. So again, Peach Festival in Gaffney. Thumbs up. That was cool. Nice and short. It was not nearly like the Hampton parade that was very, very long. It was a nice and short parade, which was great. Then we left there and went over to Greenville County and attended the Greenville County South Carolina Libertarian Party meeting. I'll get to that in just a second. And then we went to Pageland for the Watermelon Festival. And we hit the Pageland Watermelon Festival maybe toward the end of the day in kind of a lull period. It was like 5:30. There weren't a whole lot of people out there. I'll throw some pictures up on the website where you can see where we found they have these huge murals that boast watermelons, which I have just a ton of questions for the people of Pageland as far as like, are they watermelon people all year round, or is it just over the summer? Like, what's the deal? Because the watermelons were everywhere. But it's definitely their claim to fame in Pageland, which is, of course, in Chesterfield County. So we were glad to be up there and be part of that. That's our second visit to Chesterfield County. Our first one was when we went to Cheraw. And so now we've been to Pageland and to Cheraw in Chesterfield County, which is right up north on the border in what's called the Old English District of South Carolina. So thank you to the people of Pageland. We did buy a t-shirt. We did take some pictures. We talked to some law enforcement officers there and got a chance to kind of get a sense of that festival, but just didn't get a chance to stay for too long. Unfortunately, we had a very long day on Saturday. We got home after about 12 hours of being out and about for the campaign on Saturday. So thanks to my sidekick, HB Holly Russ, who came out there with me and was part of that trip. It was kind of a long day. Okay, so typically in our Money Doesn't Grow on Trees conversation, we have a shill of the week. And this is somebody who's promoting something that probably is going to benefit them in the end. And I think I did this the very first episode. I didn't have one. And on this episode, I don't really have one, but I do kind of want to give a little bit of a shout out to the South Carolina Supreme Court, which upheld a recent ruling for the Business Zoning Commission that addressed the SILFAB installation in York County. And if you're not familiar with what's going on with SILFAB, you can just Google SILFAB York County, and you can find the folks, the activists that are working on that. They're actually going to be on the live stream on August 12th. So we'll get deeper into that situation. But just so you know, there's some shenanigans going on, big surprise, with South Carolina local government related to an industrial complex up in York County. So SILFAB people, big ruling on that. You can find it out on Twitter. There's some folks already talking about it. That I'll put out as sort of it's not financial, but it is financial as far as that is concerned. And then I guess that kind of meets the shill of the week stuff. I think I had a hard time in this series related to financial conversations with looking for the actual, what's the right word for it? The scammers, the grifters, right? they're everywhere, right? And so the question for me every week when I was looking for like who's the shill of the week this week was to try to figure out which of these people do I want to put on blast on my live stream. And you guys know me, I don't want to put anybody on blast. I really don't. Like that's just not my style. I want us to be aware that people are misbehaving in these spaces. I want us to see transparency from our government agencies, but I'm not somebody that wants to go around trashing other people. So that was like kind of a hard version of this, the shill of the week. And when I first built out all of the financial conversations, all the money doesn't grow on trees series, I thought that would be pretty easy. And I could just throw these people up there and I could just say mean things about them, but I'm just not that person. So anyway, something to think about, the SILFAB concept or the idea up in York County. If you guys are not yet aware of it, you can look into it and find some more information about that. And then on August 12th, they'll be here on the live stream and we'll learn a lot more about it at that time and how citizens have gotten together to take action in their local communities. Okay, then the last piece, always before we get to our special guest, is to give a shout out to my campaign superstars. This week, the campaign superstars of the Greenville County South Carolina Libertarian Party, the Greenville County crew, and that's because they moved their monthly meeting back so that three of their members, Jessica Etheridge, Doug Niebel, and Steve Frett, could come and attend the Gaffney Peach Festival parade with me as volunteers. They were walking along with us in the parade and passing out all of our swag. Like I said, we gave out fans, we gave out bubbles. It was a lot of fun. Jessica is actually a candidate for District 4. So if you haven't looked up Jessica Etheridge yet, she's a Libertarian candidate for House of Representatives District 4. And we'll be doing some campaigning together up in the Greenville area before too long. So thanks to Jessica and Doug and Steve for coming out, and thanks to the Greenville County Party for putting their meeting back just a couple of hours so that those folks could come and help me out and volunteer with the campaign, which was really great. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce our guest for tonight. And this is somebody that I met not too long ago, but we seem to be moving in some of the same circles. And now as elections are coming a little closer and his organization's getting a little bit more involved on the legislative side, I've gotten the chance to get to know him a lot better and was really pleasantly surprised that we ended up in the same breakout group at the SC Forum event a couple of weeks ago, where we're kind of looking at each other like, hey, that's pretty cool. That sudden, like by some weird kind of lottery, we ended up in the same breakout table. So I will go and introduce Dennis Fassliotis. Dennis Fassliotis from the South Carolina Emerging Tech Association. You had me as a guest to your event back in March before you guys had your legislative day. And I wanted to bring you onto the live stream to talk about your new vision for South Carolina's digital future and the way SCETA is helping to educate our lawmakers on what this digital future could look like. So Dennis, tell us a little bit about you and about the South Carolina Emerging Tech Association.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Casey, for having us on, especially today. We officially launched Ascend SC today with our press release. We did a little road show last week up in Maryland at the Maryland Blockchain Week event. And really just a week ago, Monday, we were on stage talking about this, going through a very exhaustive slide deck, quite frankly. But back to your point on how we got together, and I'll use that probably to segue into a little more background. I call that the invisible string, the invisible thread, the thing that kind of ties us together, in rather a serendipitous way. And I always consider those great opportunities, and I think that's a very important, aspect of our of how we got together, quite frankly. And that really. It really gets back into how this all began. My background is primarily real estate investor, one to four family. Had a terrific run, prior to the housing crisis, and after I realized, after four recessions, that we were in a cycle, and that with this boom and bust cycle, you had to be prepared for. And then when the housing crisis was actually my seventh recession,
Wow.
and I was. I was expecting 2 years. I didn't expect 7 years by any means. And, there were indications of it, of course, because of the lost decade in Japan prior to that, but with similar circumstances. But, long story short, as we came out of it, I was at the age of 62, I was suddenly sort of semi-retired all of a sudden with the rents going back up. And I thought, wow, let's not do that again. So I really just started looking around for an asset, that might move opposite a down cycle. And that turned out to be my third exposure to Bitcoin. And I read the white paper once, and then I said, okay, let me read that again. And when I realized, the impact of that, really disrupting, some of the, most regulated institutions in the country, primarily the financial industry, I realized this was going to be something very, very big. So, not having the financial background really to, create a world concept and that type of thing, I felt so. Um, Going through my history, I saw the emergence of the timeshare industry and other groups being formed. So I said, well, let's just form a trade association and see what happens. So we began with
Right.
a C3 and migrated into a C6. As we realized policy was really the focus. So South Carolina Emerging Tech has really filled a niche in that we adopted 12 of the first 20 critical and emerging technologies that were announced by the administration prior to the last administration. And so, we felt as though these were the areas that really we should focus on in South Carolina. Our mission, really is to be a very agnostic, politically agnostic, from that standpoint, and really try to provide this, provide information to our policymakers, to the public, in a mainstream manner, similar to what the RAND Corporation or some other think tank may do, but really
Right.
focus on it for South Carolina's benefit. And that's how SNSC really is the genesis of all this right now.
Okay, so before we get into the details of Ascend SC, I want to talk about. I'm going to mute you because of the echo.
Oh, is there an echo?
Yeah, but you're good now. I'll unmute you in just a second. But I just want to say that, like, when people think of emerging technologies, when they think of things, there's sort of these like buzzwords that are out there. And so I like that you talked about how in your career you sort of came into this space and were like, "Hey, I'm curious about this. I want to know more about this." My first experience with any of this was a blockchain conversation up in Greenville, and a mutual friend of ours, Dirk Brown, invited me to go and be part of this blockchain conference. And I listened to this guy from IBM stand up and explain what is digital blockchain, like what does blockchain technology actually do, and getting like sort of a basic foundation of like, this is a technology that cannot be erased, it cannot be undone, you cannot rewind, right? You cannot. It is a digital ledger that keeps track of transactions, and anybody that chooses to use blockchain is creating a transparent transactional book forever and ever that can never be erased. And when we realize the power of that, you go, okay, well, what are some of the applications for this? And the guy from IBM was explaining that, like, if you were in logistics, for example, you might use it to track a shipment from place to place to place. And if that shipment, for example, had vaccines on it and the vaccines aren't allowed to get above a certain temperature, and you can see through the blockchain as it's going through all of its milestones that it does in fact stay too long in one location and probably did in fact reach a temperature that it should not have reached. When the vaccines show up and they're damaged goods, you have evidence that in fact those vaccines are damaged and we cannot actually take that product now, and we can't distribute them, we can't use them, they're no good, blah blah blah. And the idea being that like a company couldn't say, oh, they're fine, you can use them, oh, they're fine. They can't fudge the fact that they did sit for too long in that truck, in that transport. So it's a very sort of simple example of how blockchain can visibly show transparency in very complex activities that have multiple pieces to them. And so then the next thing that came around very shortly after that, because that's well before COVID that I was involved in that conversation, is currency. And so that's where we start talking about digital currency and Bitcoin and everybody into crypto and all these kinds of things. And if you're like me and not necessarily a financial person on currencies and how they work, it can be very confusing. But what you've been able to do with SCETA is kind of unlock the mystery of that and create some lessons and some language that helps people understand very easily what these digital currencies are, what we need to do as a society to be able to make them usable and accessible, but then also what we need to look for in terms of regulations and boundaries around them. And so your website is just this tremendous trove of knowledge of these technologies and how they can benefit us and what we can do to use them correctly so that we don't have to be afraid of them. And it's everything, like I said, from blockchain to AI that you all have been talking about. So as we start talking about Ascend, which is the vision piece, tell just a little bit about the lobbying day that y'all had and some of these boundaries that you've been advocating for to try to get our legislators to understand what the opportunity here is and what they need to be doing about it.
Sure. And just to kind of segue off of your comment as well, one of the important things we really tried it in redoing our website, put it in plain English. I mean, there's so much technical language and jargon, out there, that it just creates another barrier. So I really want to invite your listeners to look at it, understand, this is simple, it's just not that complex. I mean, but understanding the technology, is the basis. But it is a different way of thinking. So, but to your point and to your question, really, our lobbying efforts really started several years ago. We began back, in earnest with the bill that was recently enacted in May. That actually began at the tail end of the previous session. We've been in 2-year sessions, of course, and the South Carolina Freedom Financial Act, known as S-163, that was introduced, at the outset of the General Assembly session that just ended, back last year in 2025. It was approved with the exception of one vote in the Senate, laid the groundwork. It was sent over to the House, that same, before the end of session. We were able to move it through House this year. And it was enacted on May the 19th, if I remember the date correctly. And, the importance of it is that now South Carolina has a digital asset policy. And that's a big deal. It really is, because, we're one of the few states in the country that has a digital asset policy. Even though it's our only statute on the books, based on our ranking of what it means from really from more of a laissez-faire with general guidelines, let the industry develop. We have a very unique opportunity right now as one of probably the top 10 states in the country to have a digital asset policy. And our opportunity now is to catch up as quickly as possible, because, this is a race, and, states are competing against each other, to attract the industry and a lot of the players. And this is not just all about cryptocurrencies, healthcare applications, logistics, as you mentioned. Even the example that you mentioned, begins incorporating smart contracts, releases of payments as things are going through the process, which, in shipping and logistics, you could be 6 months out before a payment is actually made. There's all kinds of leverage based on those bills of lading. Part of the problem with it right now, and where we are in that particular application, because it's important for South Carolina as a logistics state, is there are probably 4 or 5 other, there are probably 4 or 5 developers that have actually created applications for bills of lading, but they don't talk to each other. There's no common standard. And think about that as a transaction. All the shipping that goes through all around the world, those are financial transactions that are not even tracked, because they're just basically moving goods all the way through. So unlike a stock transaction, which everybody knows, you could go to a coin market cap and see the trillions of dollars, in the Bitcoin or actually in the digital asset industry. Obviously, looking at Wall Street and how much money transfers, daily. We're talking an area that's completely regulated from a financial standpoint. So now we have the opportunity, by creating standards in that regard, of changing it dramatically, and that in the long run brings down prices. That's part of the, that really is part of the benefit. Basically, we're talking about an industry where transparency and accountability are features, not talking points. I mean, they're baked in to the underlying program. So your immutable records that you mentioned are just that. I mean, you can look back at a transaction that took place back 5 years ago. I mean, anybody can do it. Or you can look for, and if there's been a mistake made, then it's corrected, but it shows up at that point. So in
Right.
healthcare applications, I mean, we have tremendous opportunity. That ledger doesn't necessarily have to be a financial ledger. That ledger can be, one side can be test results,
Hmm.
study information. The other side can be identity. And the most regulated area, of our economy, healthcare. I mean, think about the efficiencies and the amount of information that we can pull together if we can just separate the individuals from the data that's being collected at that point. That then goes into your large language models. That's then becomes looking for patterns that could potentially create new vaccines, new diagnoses, all kinds of opportunities. I mean, I've got a buddy of mine that's actually working on a 200-year life project, and that with the advances in AI, the thought process there over the next 10 years, if we make it 10 years, the advances in AI, may actually extend your lifespan faster than
Right.
than the impact does that will bring you down. So we're really living in a remarkable time. I mean, and obviously every generation has its inflection point, and this is ours.
The blockchain piece is that fundamental technology upon which all of these things get built, but being able to recognize the opportunity here and all the many applications of it, and then where do we need to create standards or communities around it, and are the industries themselves to be trusted as far as how they're going to regulate themselves and how they're going to use it. All of these questions create some really interesting dialogue that needs to be had in the public space. And we don't need to just have sort of grandstanding and laws against and outlawing this and outlawing that. And we also, I don't think, want those technology companies that are benefiting from these policies to be the only voices in the room. Part of the thing that I thought was so impressive with SCETA is that you guys, as this kind of advocate group, bring in a citizen's perspective, you bring a user perspective, you bring a visionary perspective, like here's all the opportunities, but then also here's all the risks that are associated with this. And it's not in a, you're not advocating for any particular stock symbol that you're going to make money off of. You're advocating for humanity in a way, and in our case, in our state, for South Carolina citizens. And that's what it attracted me to SCETA and has had me really following what you guys have been doing and working on, because I am impressed with your citizen first focus. So tell us about Ascend
Yeah,
SC and how
yeah.
it's a differentiator.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of digressed a little bit there, but Ascend SC really started by listing. I mean, and that goes back several years actually, with my experience and just learning. I mean, going to committee hearings, listening to the presentations of the utility companies. I mean, different stakeholders, at the committee hearings. I mean, but it really took a big leap just the last few weeks with all of the data center debate going on, and
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook, making some posts, looking to see what happens, and I just started asking questions, and actually that developed into a polling mechanism. To date, we've had over 43,000 views of our poll questions, hundreds of responses. So what we were able to do there is really digest that down into what the public is really talking about. I mean, obviously we have a big lobby that says no data centers. I mean, just literally shut it all down. We don't want them here from that standpoint. But then when you really
Mm-hmm.
dig into that, we recognize the fact that people have really concerns about real concerns. I mean, obviously surveillance is a big
Sure.
concern, number one concern. One of the top. Let's put it that way. That and water. So resources. I mean, the externalities that Senator Davis, calls it, and I think that was S867 that we testified in. What are the? I mean, obviously the impact of citing. So so really what we came up with as Ascend SC is a consumer-facing policy advocacy program that considers the consumer first. Obviously, looks at what industry wants, identifies the needs for the state. So even when we, with all the hubbub going on about incentives and the problems that we've had with that, we're looking at it from the standpoint, what does the state need? Okay, so as an example of that, and also, I've gotten a lot of good input on this from our conservation groups. They're looking for certain things for renewable energy and being able to
Hmm.
advocate for batteries. We now have industrial grade batteries, industrial size battery. We have battery manufacturers in South Carolina, but they're
Yep.
mostly here to support the EV industry. They're not supporting generation companies or or big projects like this. A hospital, for example, is for
Right.
with battery backup. Okay, so what we're saying is, okay, include an incentive here in the drafts we're working on for next year. Let's include an incentive for industrial battery that are purchased from manufacturers in South Carolina. Well, guess what? We don't have one in South Carolina right now. But how many industrial battery when we start knitting this together with the manufacturing mentality, and obviously jobs being brought in that way versus the lower number of jobs associated with data centers, which is often used as a criticism, but it's actually a benefit. We can go into that later on as well. But the end goal here is that we can craft our own future by understanding that payments and identity are merging. Okay, and that's the promise of blockchains, digital assets, and exactly what you referred to. Obviously, an immutable database, and so we're not looking at third parties. Uh, you know, KYC, know your customer laws.
Right.
For actually knowing what your transactions are and the banks that are involved. And then we're also looking at energy and compute as the
Hmm.
really the I mean the power that drives our industry in the state, that keeps us cool at night, that needs to be shut down perhaps during peak demand. Now some of these large users will shut down automatically in digital asset data centers when demand is high from the residential standpoint. And we have
Right.
evidence of that in the Greenville-Spartanburg corridor. It actually happens every day. We just haven't seen the impact of it like we did during Winter Storm Elliott. But that particular corridor, where you look at Duke operating areas, they operate in the upstate Piedmont area. They operate in Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte. Well, on Christmas Eve in 2022, Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte had 6 hours of rolling blackouts. Greenville, Spartanburg did not. And the reason they did not is because there were digital asset miners in that market. They shut down in a matter of minutes, pumped 150
Hmm.
megawatts back into the grid. That's power. Okay, that
Right.
literally is. And the sad part about this right now is that they're actually having to defend that. That's what happened in Spartanburg. Just I believe it was just last night when the CEO of Pacolet Electric testified, and didn't get into the nuances of Bitcoin mining or AI inference or what type of data centers they are, and that makes a difference. There are different types of data centers. So, but in their case, we know exactly what happened up there. So, so there are benefits that this industry brings, for grid resiliency, really harmonizing the grid, keeping it, maintaining base load and utilizing base load more efficiently. And S163 as the guardrails for that has already established some basic data center language that we expect will be brought into the conversation now because we have a basis for this, and we have quite a bit of public awareness. We have our polling information, and from that we built Ascend SC, and Ascend SC really is South Carolina's blueprint to enter a digital economy, and that's really what we're very proud of it. It's this didn't just come about on its own. It really has been years in the making, and the culmination of it is really an opportunity for South Carolina to lead. We actually have this. We're presenting this to other states. A number of state associations that I'm members of as well, national associations, and we're right now putting together a consortium about 4 or 5 other states that will monitor our pilot progress, obviously be able to utilize a lot of our library and our resource library. Every state's got the same problems, nuances, different here, whatever the case may be. But it's really a very exciting time. And I think we're really at an inflection point. We're really talking about how do we change economic development in South Carolina, strictly from a
Right.
manufacturing and job creation to building energy, building compute. Compute is the resource of of the next economy. I mean, you can't do it without compute. That's the key.
I think I think a big takeaway for folks who are either if you're just joining us or if you're picking this up, midway through, and we're talking to the South Carolina Emerging Tech Association with Dennis, the idea here, there's two big pieces. The first is that there is a place where you can go and get educated on these emerging technologies, on data centers, on understanding what the digital opportunities are here in this new technology, in this space. You can go to that website. I put it up here a minute ago. I'll put it up there again. And there's just this huge library of white papers and diagrams and infographics that will share with you what you need to know. So you can, in fact, educate yourself, which is great, for free. You can educate yourself for free. But the second big takeaway, and this is why I wanted to have you on the live stream, is that you are a citizen of South Carolina, Dennis, who has taken this upon yourself to run with this and to organize this effort. And you have shown us, the rest of us as citizens, that we can, in fact, be advocates for the things that we believe to be important issues in our state, and that you can create the kinds of resources and the kinds of community that you need to create in order to move the needle on these conversations. And a lot of times we think we don't really have a lot of agency, or we don't really have a lot of control over what's going to happen in the General Assembly, or what the tech companies are doing, or they're buying this, they're buying that. Everybody else is puppeteering stuff. But you are proof, and SCETA is proof, that there are citizens in our state who are willing to put their time and energy and money and resources into educating themselves and each other and advocating for what's best for all of us, not just for now, but for the foreseeable future. And I just think it's amazing. I'm super impressed with the work you're doing. I think Ascend SC is groundbreaking, and I think you're going to see a lot of other states want to follow in your same footsteps with this. And it really is, in my mind, the kind of citizen leadership that all libertarians talk about, as we've got to have this. Like, we've got to have citizens that take it on themselves to do this work. So thank you, Dennis, for doing it.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having me on. Obviously, this is about my kids, my grandkids, and my great grandkids. So really, I mean, obviously, I don't want to see them, grow up in a dystopian future. We know, we have very powerful technologies here. They can be they can be programmed to do anything and to influence us to do anything. And we want to err on the side of freedom and the Constitution. And freedom tech is really our focus. How do we use these technologies to guarantee our freedoms? I want to commend y'all, really the Libertarian Party, on the resolution that brought about part of this, partly what brought this about, because that resolution is very important. And where we see that going really as a digital bill of rights. We were really at that last point, where I mean, big tech, big government, they're in our lives every day. Obviously, we have. I mean, we are the product. I mean, in a internet, that doesn't cost us anything. Guess who's getting paid? The folks that are that are selling you product. And if you don't think they're listening, all we have to do is talk about a particular product. You'll be getting an ad, from your local advertiser, either on your smart TV or on your phone, or through your social media. And I mean, and there are opportunities to change that. So surveillance is a big deal, and and obviously, we see that instead of really just trying to control, the camera, if you will, because I think your resolution relates to flock cameras and a lot of the surveillance there. It's a very fine line. We have ring cameras and we have flock cameras. I mean, one is on the private side, the other's on the public side. And how that is actually defined, is really the makings for good policy, good smart policy. And that's what we really try to do. We're looking at this from a smart standpoint. We want to lean into it. We don't want to be reactive to it. A number of states in the country that that have led in this. They have been scared to death that that a small state like South Carolina that packs way above its weight. It punches way above its weight in economic development on the East Coast. I mean, but we're here now. It's just a matter of people understanding it and really recognizing the fact that the future is ours. All we have to do is define it and choose to look through the windshield instead of through the rearview mirror.
Agreed, 100%. Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for being here. I look forward to the next time we're going to get to spend time together. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but hopefully it'll be soon. And we can really break down the surveillance state, maybe over a couple of beers.
Yeah. Well, we hope to see you in September. So.
All right. Thanks. I'll see you soon. Have a great day.
Take care.
All right. Here's the thing, and a couple of just quick high-level takeaways. SCETA is about educating citizens so that we can have agency in what's happening to our communities and what's happening in our state. So go and educate yourself, SCETA. That Ascend SC roadmap that Dennis referred to, it's a great way to visualize what might it look like if South Carolina were to embrace these technologies and welcome these technologies into our state with the kind of boundaries that communities need to be able to say, hey, this is about what the community wants and what the state wants and what our citizens want, not necessarily about what the companies want, what those tech companies want. And we see the reactive piece happening after the companies have gotten in. They got in ahead of us. They sold their product into our state agencies. They were there first, and it's very difficult to peel them out afterwards. But if we have a vision for what we want things to look like, then before those technologies ever come forward, we get the chance to say, hey, this is the way we want things to go in our state. So I just really commend what SCETA is doing, and I would encourage everybody that has questions or problems or comments or concerns related to things like data centers and especially economic development related to technology companies to go and utilize those resources. And by the way, anything you send to Dennis, he will 100% respond and answer your questions. He is probably the most giving person I've ever met in this space as far as time and energy is concerned. So I'm just really grateful to him for being here today. Okay. Live streams this month were all about money doesn't grow on trees. Okay. So we've been focusing on economics. We've been focusing on currency. We've been focusing on international trade. We've been looking at the national debt. How do we bring this economics conversation in a way that's approachable, that's accessible, that makes people feel like, hey, we can actually do something about this? Critical takeaways, money doesn't grow on trees, is that every problem is a debt problem. And every time our government grows, it spends more money. And the question is whether or not we can afford to do these things, whether or not we can afford to continue in the direction we're headed, or what do we need to do to either pull back or change direction. So just keep thinking about that from this economic perspective. What's next? The next couple of live streams we're going to get into in August are really going to focus on the political process and specifically what we in the libertarian circles like to call the duopoly or the uniparty. I've heard it referred to as the uniparty, which is these establishment political parties and the way they have created rules and barriers to entry that make it very difficult to shove them out of the way or even really to compete with them. And so, of course, this is a campaign for U.S. Senate. I'm one of 4 people that will be on the ballot on November 3rd. There is a Constitution Party candidate, there's a Democratic Party candidate, and on August 11th, they will choose their Republican Party candidate to replace the late Lindsey Graham, who passed away not too long ago. So be keeping in mind that when we get into August, we're really going to start focusing on the duopoly and what's wrong with our current system. I heard somebody say earlier to me today that the majority of Americans are really sick of the current system that we're in, and we don't know what to do about it. And so just be aware. It won't be a whole month of complaining, I promise. There's going to be some really good call to actions and some things that you can actually do to try to break out of the stalemate that we're in. And really, it's about restoring agency. I want voters to believe that they can actually make a difference here. And certainly SCETA giving us the empowerment on the digital currency side, all the digital technology side. All right, last piece. What do I need from you? Well, over the last week since Senator Graham passed away, there have been a ton of news articles related to the upcoming Republican primary. And they're talking about all the different candidates who've jumped in to try to win that nomination from the Republicans. And in all that news coverage, they keep saying that whoever wins it is going to be facing the Democratic candidate. it's not just the Democratic candidate. They're going to be facing me as well, right? Remember, I'm on the ballot on November 3rd. So all of you out there that want to help, that want to push this campaign forward, go in. If you see those articles, go into the comments section and remind the news organizations that they need to do their right reporting. They need to say that there are more than just those others on the ballot. Tell them, Casey, South Carolina, Casey Whitener, U.S. Senate, South Carolina, right? Just give them, you can tag me in it. You can give the link to the website, but tell them, hold them accountable. When your news organizations are not giving you the full picture, some of that is because they think they can get away with it. So go in there and tell them, remind them, it's not just the Democratic candidate that whoever wins on August 11th is going to be facing. They'll also be facing me. So we want to make sure that's out there. So that is your job, digital people, as you're going out into the world, is to respond to all of those news articles. And if you can, join our Facebook hype group so that wherever you see any of those articles, you can also use the Facebook comments and let people know that that I've got your vote. I would love that. That would make me so happy. It makes me very happy to see comments from folks, people that I don't know, responding to the work that we're doing and the stuff that we're putting out there. So thank you very much for that. Tell a friend. That's how this thing grows, is if you go out there and tell a friend. All right. That's it. We went a little bit over tonight, but I'm so grateful to Dennis for sharing his information with us. Check out SCETA.io. That's where you can get the full Ascend SC framework and have a full sense of what that all looks like, and get on board with SCETA. Appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Sorry. One more thing. I know I said I was done. I'm not quite done yet. One more thing. We're going to be in Darlington on Saturday. I love Darlington. I love the Darlington Raceway. We go to the Darlington Raceway to watch NASCAR races. We used to do it a lot more before we had children, but it is our favorite thing to do, right? And so we are going to go over to Darlington, and we're actually going to get to drive around the racetrack in Charlie's car. We're not taking my car. I want to take my car. We're going to take Charlie's car instead. And this is an effort to raise money for an organization called One Child at a Time. And that organization is working on human trafficking in South Carolina, a pretty big deal, pretty big issue, and some really important work being done by a community organization in Darlington. So we want to support them at the Darlington Raceway on Saturday. We'll be there by 11 o'clock. We'll be there from 11 to 1, and then we'll be having lunch in Darlington afterwards. So we'll be glad to see you guys there. Find all that information on my social channels, and I would love to see you out there. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and I will see you on our next live stream.